Right, let's do some quick review on adding and subtracting fractions, which hopefully most of you are very familiar with, so this won't take very long. Just as a quick reminder, a fraction is what we call a number that is less than one whole. So if we're looking at this first square, let's say that this is one cake. And if you have all of the cake, then that means you have one whole cake. But let's say you went to a party and half the cake got eaten. So this half the cake is no longer here. Well, now we have a fraction of the cake. We have a part of it left, and in this case we have 1/2 of the cake left. So pretty straightforward. That's what a fraction is. It's always just a part of a whole number. It's also a way to write when you have, like, let's say right here we have 1 cake, 2 cakes, plus a half a cake, so we have 2.5 cakes. So that's another number of fractions that we can use. Let me just erase this really quick, because the other thing I want to review is just the term, oh, my eraser's being funny. Sadness, my cake got destroyed by an angry beaver. Alright, we'll just remake this cake. Poor cake. Okay, here we go. Let's bring back our cake. Now let's say we have our one cake and we've cut it in half, but nobody's eaten anything yet. Well, in that case, we still have one whole cake, but it's split into 1/2 and 1/2. When we have 2 halves, we still have a whole cake. So one cake could also be written as 2 halves, which equals 1 because it equals a whole, but it's another way of writing something depending on how it's been split. And this becomes very handy when we are trying to add fractions that aren't cut into the same numbers. Like, let's say that we had cut this portion of the cake like this. Well, now it's 1/4 and 1/4 and 1/2, and we need to be able to add those together, and this little knowledge that one cake is also equal to 2 halves will be very helpful for doing that, as you'll see in just a few minutes. Okay, let me bring back our normal cake. Come back, cake. Alright, so let's look at our first example problem. I tried to keep it pretty simple. 1/4 plus 1/4. Well, the answer here is we just add up the top numbers. So we have 1 plus 1 equals 2. And then the bottom numbers, or the denominators, they just tell us how big our slice is. So this doesn't change when we're adding. So it would just be 2/4. We have 2 pieces of cake that are 1/4 size big. Let's draw it out over here. Joop, joop, joop. We had 1/4 right here. And let's say for some reason people were weird and they ate this cake, and they ate this side of the cake, but they left this one. So we have 1/4 plus 1/4, which equals 2 pieces, 2/4. But if we look at this, we can divide this by 2, right? 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So we still have half the cake left, but we write it as maybe 2/4 because the 2/4 aren't right next to each other, so it doesn't totally look like 1/2 of the cake. So that's the easy first problem. Now let's get to the second problem. We have 1/4 plus 3/8. Now this is a little tricky because we don't have the same size pieces here. We have a piece of cake that's 1/4 size, and we have pieces of cake that are 1/8 sized. And we can't just add those together unless these bottom numbers are the same. We have to make sure these bottom numbers are the same in order to add our fractions together. So the mathematical way to get this is we're going to figure out what number do we need to multiply 4 by in order to make it the same number as 8. Well, 4 times 2 is 8, so we need to multiply this fraction by 2 in order to get it to be 8. But we can't change how much of the fraction we have. We don't want to alter 1/4. We still want it to be 1/4 of the cake, but we just need to change the numbers that we're dealing with so that they match up. I'll show you how. So 1/4, and if we multiply 1/4 times 2 over 2. Remember, 2 over 2 is the same as 1, and 1 times anything is just that thing, right? We have 1 of 1/4. So this is not going to change how much of the cake we say we have, but it is going to change the number of pieces that we have so that we can add it better to 3/8. So let's do this problem really quick. 1 times 2 is 2, and 4 times 2 is 8. So when we have 1/4 of the cake, we could also say that we have 2/8 of the cake. And now that 2/8 matches the 3/8, we can add those together. So we'll write it down here. 2/8 plus 3/8 equals 2 plus 3 is 5. And then the 8 doesn't change because it's just telling us how big that slice of cake is. So 5/8 is our answer. Yay! Now let me show you this when we're doing it over on an actual diagram. So let's say we have, okay, I just got to be able to split these into eighths now, which is really way too fancy for my brain this morning. Okay, here we go. Let's cut this cake. Boo! So now it's in fourths. Nope. Okay, so in this problem too, we had 1/4 of the cake. I'm going to shade in what we have this time. So this means we have 1/4 of the cake. And then we had 3/8. 1, 2, 3. We need to know how to add 3/8 to 1/4. In order to do that, we have to make this 1/4 size piece of cake the same size as these 3/8 size pieces of cakes. Well, if you're cutting a cake, you know how to do this. You just need to add a slice down this one, and it'll be the same size as these ones. And what did we do there? Well, we divided the cake in half, but we multiplied the number of pieces that we had. So that's why this 2 times 2 thing works. Same amount of cake, but we changed the number of pieces. So that then we had 1/8, 2/8, that's our 1/4 piece, plus the 1, 2, 3/8 that we had already. So that's what we're doing when we do this little multiplication thing. We're just cutting the cake into smaller pieces so that we can have the same number and size of pieces, same size of pieces as the rest of the cake and add it all together really nicely. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this problem because it took over my example 3 section, which was rude. Alright, so the answer to this one was 5/8. And now 5/8 we can't simplify any further because we can't divide 5 by anything that we can divide 8 by, so 5/8 is the final answer. Alright, now if you're going to subtract a fraction, it's pretty simple. You're just basically doing the same thing in reverse. So let's say that we have 13/16. Let's say that you needed to feed 16 people this cake. So we divide it into eighths, and we're like, but we need more cake, so we divide it into 16 pieces so that everybody could have a piece. Well, you have 13/16 because somebody snuck a couple pieces of cake before we got to this, and then we have not quite as many guests eat cake as we thought they were going to, so it turns out that only 9 of our guests ate cake. So 3/16 minus 9/16 is going to be left over of 4/16. Now let's look at this number. Can we divide 4 and 16 by the same number to make this a little smaller? Yes, we can. So we can divide this by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 16 divided by 4 is 4. So we have 1/4 of the cake left over. Now let's look at this over here. So we had 13 slices of cake, right? So that means that 3 slices had already been eaten. 3 slices already eaten. Then 9 people came along and ate 9 more slices. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, as you can see, we have 4 pieces left over, or in this case, I'm going to turn this red, we have, that's supposed to be in the middle line. We have 1/4 of the cake left over, and that's what we see in the numbers over here. So our numbers match our diagram. That means we're doing great. Alright, and then if you're going to subtract a fraction, just remember that you always have to make sure, sorry, I can probably keep this. that the denominators are the same. If they're not the same, we have to go through the same process that we went through with 1/4 and 3/8 in order to make the denominators the same, so that the same size pieces can be added or subtracted together. Alright, that's all for this video. I'll see you in the next one.